Naming a YouTube series after a day of the week has proven challenging, especially when that day of the week is... I leave things to the last minute. I'm an arch procrastinator, and as a consequence, this tends to mean I have to create the content on the weekend, which has its challenges, having lots of young children, as I do. Also, the last few weeks, 2 weeks ago, Linked Above and Below, I did a TV series which was live, or TV show rather, which was live, and that fell on a Sunday. So that rendered, basically, it's my first no show for one of these Mondays. And then the following week, basically, I no longer have a studio. My shed is powered down. This is because my old Georgian building where my family lives, the electricity has been condemned. So we're having to basically tear our house to pieces to do a full rewire. And this means that my studio doesn't have any power at the moment. However, I have come up with a bit of content that I think you may be interested in this week, and that is about this new mixing desk that I have bought. Have I made a huge mistake? A Rupert Neve 5060. It's made in the USA, and the build quality is simply astonishing. But it looks like a cheeky little monkey. It looks like it's a 4-track mixer, or actually it's an 8-track mixer because these are stereos. But actually, this little brute packs a much, much bigger punch. Now, I think the best way to really work out the power of a bit of kit is to actually look at its bottom. So let's look at the rear end first. We have our AC, our power, and then we have an on-off switch, and then a cooling fan. We've got a USB, which basically turns this into a DAW controller, not something I'm going to be using, but I'll come back to that. And you can also use it, I think, is it through HUI? You can control it with MIDI as well. We've got this ground and lift to eradicate any hums that you may be having. At the top here, you can basically convert the 4 main faders that are on the front from either a stereo or a mono. So here's our stereo inputs. You need to basically create a breakout cable where you can plug stuff into. And then we've got our inputs 9 to 16 and 17 to 24. So this is in fact a 24-track mixing or summing environment. Now, these inputs have the functionality of sends and returns. So basically you can put inserts into the signal path. These are just kind of plain inputs. So you need to basically, if you're having any kind of EQ or compression on this, you need to make sure it's applied before it gets into the desk. You've also got this is actually, I believe, an input, which is some external monitors, and it can have, I think, up to 3 different inputs coming in, so DVD player, that kind of stuff. Then you've got 3 monitor outs, which you can select from the front, so your big fat speakers, your mid-range, your nasty 10s, for example. We've got 2 stereo talkback outs, which again you can fiddle with in the front. We've got a total mix insert as well, so you can use external master compression, master EQ via these sends here. And then this is our mix out into your tape machine or your DAW, whatever you're going to record with it. So what we have on the front are basically 4 faders, the stereo faders, which you can switch to mono as I described. Each fader you can switch in or out the inserts, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and has a tasty little cut button, a mute button. The mix also, as we saw on the back, has an insert which you can flick in and out, and this is where our stereo auxiliaries come in. So basically stuff that you can send in that has already maybe been through processing, EQs, that kind of stuff. This is where I'm planning for a lot of my synth stuff to come in, and it'll all get kind of melded together with the mix, with the kind of sound better outboard stuff on the mix bus. Got a lovely monitor volume. On the main control room panel, we've got our talkback assigned. As mentioned before, we've got basically 4 different inputs for the device. So we've got our mix, so this will activate whatever's being mixed in the machine, and then we have external inputs via the external breakout cable, so you can have a CD player, DVD player, that kind of thing. We've got a mono, switches the whole thing to mono, and we've got different monitor outs, as again you saw on the back. This is this really interesting thing, this silk thing. I don't know what it does, but it basically colors the sound, and we will experiment with that this week. I believe there are 2 settings, or 3 rather. There's off, there's on, and then there's a kind of extra silky one. But again, I'll take you through that when it's all kind of plumbed in. We've got our dim level, and then we've got our door controller section. We've got a shuttle, we can put it into cycle, different rewinds, plays, add markers, all of that kind of stuff. This area I'm never going to use. I have a strong belief in not making obscure hardware part of your muscle memory, because it basically renders you useless when you go to other studios. So I will not be using this. Some people may find it very handy when they're doing kind of mixing, which is a mixture of the door ins, say through the auxiliaries, and maybe some live material. And then finally at the front we've got a headphone jack there. Now what you'll immediately notice about this environment is there's no dynamics, there's no EQ, there are no kind of bus sends, all of that kind of stuff. So it's very much a rudimentary mixing or summing environment, but it is made to the very highest quality, so I have no doubt it's going to sound great. What I'm creating is a mixing environment that uses the best of all worlds. Rupert Neve kind of desk for the summing, the amplitude for the inserts, all of that kind of stuff. And then I'm using Neve AMS compressors, dynamics, EQs, SSL, API, and some Marg as well, alongside my existing outboard, my Manleys, all of that kind of stuff. So basically this is going to really embrace the power of my studio and be the unifying force for it. So it seems that for once I made a wise purchasing decision, albeit an expensive one. It's a too good to be true piece of kit. Or is it? I started thinking about stereo, and then suddenly a large elephant appeared in the room. So what if we were to use these 4 channels, maybe one of them or some of them or all of them, as mono faders, so for mono signals? How does that work? Here you can basically convert the 4 main faders that are on the front from either a stereo or a mono, and basically when it's in mono it takes the left-hand signal and uses that. Fine, so that seems fairly straightforward. Okay, so now we just need to work out how to pan these sounds around. Well, those are the auxiliaries. It's got no fucking pan pots. I should have really realised that before I bought it, but there are ways around it. It's just, I mean, it doesn't quite render it into kind of chocolate teapot territory, but it certainly is. I think it's quite an omission, really. I think panning is so rudimentary to what we want to do with our touchy-feely, put things in the stereo domain, that, well, to put it mildly, it's disappointing. I'm going to be able to use my lunchbox setups to be able to kind of basically reduce the amount of signal coming out of one compared to the other, and therefore use that to pan stuff around. But the fact that it's got the kind of stereo to mono switches just makes me even more confused, because basically you would always want to use it in stereo mode. You know, you'd send a mono signal into a stereo field and pan it before it gets to this mixer. Anyway, as I say, a bit of an elephant in the room. Doesn't render it to be a totally appalling choice, but it's just a bit disappointing. Next week, I'm going to hopefully set it up and do some blind testing between the 8816, the Neve summing mixer, and this thing, see what you think, but also trying this different coloration, these different silks that this has. I think it's going to be very interesting. And hopefully I'm edging ever closer to completing my first totally doorless track, my first out-of-the-box track for, I don't know, 25, maybe even 30 years. It's going to be fun. Thanks to those of you who keep watching Modular Mondays. I know it has a slightly kind of more niche appeal than the rest of the CHM content, but Sandy and I really do enjoy making this content because it offers us a really good motivator to continue kind of macheting our way through these uncharted, forested areas of technology. Thanks as always for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'm going to be putting together, hopefully, my new kind of B studio next week, and if you want to be notified when we put this video up, just hit the little bell icon. Hit like if you like what we do, and we'll see you next week.